Okay, so we have the next problem. We have your depth versus time graph for your observations, right? So you got your curve. And now we're going to do the trapezoid corresponding to the difference quotient for t equals 30 and delta t equals 50. Now the difference quotient, that says x here, but we should be using t, is f of t plus delta t minus f of t. And this should be real familiar to you from what we did yesterday. Some people are missing some of the point here, so we want to do this. Okay? Okay, so what do we need? What information do we need? We need f of t. That's a good place to start. Let's not try to get two things at once. Let's just isolate it. So in approaching this problem, if it was stated like this, you would have to say, okay, let's see, what does anybody mean by the graph of depth versus time? Well, that should be real familiar to you, right? Then you got to say, okay, oh yeah, what's a difference quotient? Well, you got to know what a difference quotient is and all the stuff we talked about yesterday with the triangles and all that stuff. And the basic picture, which a lot of you drew in your papers for this, Beethoven again, which a lot of people drew on their papers, okay? So, you know, I know the information's out there, make sure you use it. Okay, so now we've got the difference quotient, we got to deconstruct that one step at a time, one thing at a time. Just like the algorithms I'm writing, one step at a time, you put them together and you get something, okay? So, let's just pick something in the difference quotient. Okay, well, we know what delta t is, right? It's supposed to be 50, meaning 50 seconds. So we know how long delta t is, but we're not sure where to put it. And it's going to be this long, right? This long. But we're not sure exactly what to do with that yet, so let's go on to f of t. Okay, well, what's f of t? What do you have to know before you know what f of t is? You got to know what t is, right? Do they have any information here about t? Yeah, t is 30. So now we've got to find f of 30. What's f of 30? Where are we going to find f of 30?
On the y-axis?
Could be. How are we going to find it? Well, t equals 30 is right here, right? Okay, so how are you going to find f of 30? Now, if you've got the formula for f, which we don't, I'm just saying do it based on the graph and estimate it, okay? If you have the formula, you plug it into the formula for f of t, right? Because that's what that means, you plug it in. You just don't leave the f off, and some people did that. Just leave the f off here and the f off here, and it gets really easy, okay? Now, if t is 30, how are you going to get f of t?
You just go straight up from 30?
Yeah, f of t is the value you get for 30, and the value you get for 30 is this distance here, and it's also this coordinate, right? This is a centrally important picture, okay? So, you know, going into, say, a calculus class with this picture and with some of the skills you're developing here is going to give you a big head start, okay? So you don't have to sit and puzzle over this picture for a week before you understand what's going on. Okay, so anyhow, you got 30. Okay, and there's your f of t. Well, that's f of 30, so let's... Okay, and we could write out this, okay, means... Now for this situation, f of 50 plus 30 minus f of 30 over 10. Sorry, over 50. That's a really bad looking 5. Okay. So anyhow, we got the 30, we've got the f of 30 that goes right here, okay? Now, what do you want to find next?
X plus...
Well, we could estimate f of 50 plus 30, right? I don't have an estimate here, but you know, it's probably about 60. It's a little more than halfway between 0 and 100, right? So let's go say, okay, this is about 60 now. And of course, this is f of 80.
How do we know that's about 60?
You look at it and estimate it.
Okay.
I just said, it's a little more than halfway between here and here. So I'm just going to say 60. I really think it's about 57.43. I'll just say 60 because, you know, y'all sitting a little further, you probably can't estimate that close. Okay, so about 60. And it's a ballpark, make your own estimate. Okay? So we need f of 50 plus 30. How are we going to get f of 50 plus 30? Do we take f of 50 and add f of 30? No, that violates order of operations because 50 plus 30 is in the parentheses anyway, and you don't have a distributive law for function notation, for heaven's sakes. Okay? So you're going to add 50 plus 30, and you're going to get f of 80, and now we got something we can locate. Here's 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So here's 80. And we project this over, and we get f of 80 here. Okay, well, that's less than halfway here, right? But it's a little more than halfway to halfway. Okay? So I'm going to say that's approximately, that my estimate is going to be 30. Okay? Yeah, it's about a third of the way. 1, 2, 3. That's, you know, maybe it's only halfway to halfway because it looks like it might be closer to 25. Since I've already got a 30, I'll use 25 just so we can distinguish the numbers. Okay? So we have f of 80 and f of 30. Where are you going to find f of 80 minus f of 30?
$60 minus 25. No, 25 minus 60.
On the picture. How are you going to picture it?
Go to f of 50.
Huh?
Go to 50.
The midpoint of 30 and 80.
No, we don't want to do that. But if we're graphing slope versus midpoint, we're going to want that midpoint, so I'm glad you thought of it, but it's not relevant to this question, at least not so far.
What's the question exactly?
Our question is, we're supposed to estimate the slope, right?
Okay, so f of 80 minus f of 30, so it's going to be 25 minus 60. So, because f of 80 is 25 and f of 30 is 60. 25 minus 60 over 50 is going to equal your slope.
So why should that be the slope? That would be the difference quotient, right?
Oh, never mind. Yeah, you did. Yeah, whatever that is.
Okay, but what's that have to do with the slope? Well, let's finish the difference quotient because that's what you just said, and that's a good thing to do. So f of 80 is about 25, f of 30 is about 60. You divide that by 10, and you get negative 35 over 10. So that's your difference quotient, right? That's the value of your difference quotient. Now, what's the slope between this point and this point? What's the definition of slope?
Oh,
Is there a
no,
triangle that we
estimate.
could use? Is
Oh,
there a triangle that we could draw?
there must.
Okay, and actually the directions for the problem say construct the trapezoid. Okay? So we can construct the trapezoid, here it is. And if you follow the directions on the problem, that's what you will do. You'll construct the trapezoid, you'll say, okay, this side is 60, this side is 25, and now we can easily get the area of the trapezoid, which will be pretty close to the area under the curve, right? And the slope of the trapezoid, well, the slope of the curve keeps changing, but the average slope is going to be that of the trapezoid, okay? On this interval. Okay, so we just label the trapezoid. Okay? So what's the slope?
25 minus 60 over 80 minus 30.
Yeah, well, it's, the slope is basically the slope of this fundamental triangle, right?
Yeah.
So if we go from here to here, what's the rise?
Negative 35.
Yeah, not exactly what I think Morgan just said, is 80 minus 25, right?
Negative
So-
35 over 50.
Yeah, and I screwed up here. I said 10, because I still had the increment from a previous problem in my feeble brain. This comes out negative 0.7, not negative 3.5. Okay, rise over run. The rise is negative 35 divided by the run, which is 50, which is negative 0.7.
So
Okay.
you were trying to find the slope.
Huh?
You were finding the slope.
Well, the difference quotient for this interval is the slope of this trapezoid.
So wait, what is the definition of the difference quotient? And like what is that?
What does it
necessarily?
represent?
What is pointing at the
It
chart?
represents the average slope between those 2 points. And its limit as delta t goes to 0 is the instantaneous slope at the point, which we'll calculate in a minute. Okay, for the quadratic function, it's very simple. So we want to see how the difference quotient gives you the slope, and the difference quotient is really just concerned with this fundamental triangle. It doesn't need the trapezoid, right? But for any trapezoid, you can draw a fundamental triangle and find its slope. It's very straightforward. Okay? And why is this important? Okay, well, let's see, what's the meaning of the slope? Because if we know the meaning of the slope, we know the meaning of the fundamental of the difference quotient, because they're the same thing, right? The slope of the fundamental triangle for t and t plus delta t, for the interval from t to t plus delta t, is the slope of the fundamental triangle, or the average slope of the graph on that interval. Okay, so now, meaning. Okay, so slope and the essential thing is the meaning, which gives people more trouble in a calculus class than the operations do. So as a result, people don't teach the meaning much because it's hard for people. But it's what people need to know. And because of the pressures of our educational system for grades, it often doesn't get done. Or you go to a good university and you don't learn to do it and you're out of that curriculum at least. Okay? Screw up all your other classes, you may be out completely. If you can't get through your calculus class and learn some meanings, you're probably not going to make it in a rigorous mathematically based course. Okay, so you need to do this, and I'm going to give you a head start. So you can keep thinking about it through the rest of your high school career and go to college better prepared than most others. Okay. Also, I mean, it's just important for life. You know, how would I get from one end of the pool to the other if I couldn't calculate things?
You just
And
couldn't.
once I was playing intramural
Oh, you
football
couldn't.
out here,
If you didn't have
You
numbers
can't
in,
just
you
swim
absolutely
across the
couldn't.
pool. It's
Can't
not
do
that
that.
simple.
No way, you can't just.
why would anybody do that?
I know, it's crazy.
Exactly. It's
I know.
ridiculous.
You gotta calculate every
You
step.
can't. You gotta
Nobody-
calculate every single step,
nobody
otherwise
can
it's
just
like
go
literally.
along.
not
Because
possible.
if you don't
Well,
calculate every step, you might not do it with maximum efficiency the first time you try.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to do that.
Nobody.
Yeah,
You can't just get from
ruin
one
your
place to another.
self-confidence, your self-esteem, and just, you know. Okay, and
It's
the
that
whole
important
educational
to me.
system's trying to build up your self-esteem whether you deserve it or not. Okay?
I think that's a good plan. Because
Okay, well, anyhow, self-esteem's important, but you don't want to make it artificial. The idea of everybody getting a trophy just offends me to no end. I worked hard for my trophies,
self-esteem is important, but you can't
Didn't
make
get
it
that many.
artificial.
okay? And they weren't automatically given out like popcorn.
You earned your Nobel Prize.
Huh?
You earned your Nobel Prize.
Well, yeah,
If
but it
I-
doesn't have the standards it used to. You know, so.
If I get you a trophy that says Nobel Prize on it, can I pass this class? Even if it's with a D.
What?
Well, you have high hopes.
Better, I'll cut you out a Nobel Prize out of paper.
No, I will make
Can I
it
get
out
an
of
A?
wood.
Okay, yeah, let's
I'll
not
make it harder
digress.
for you.
Okay, I don't want a Nobel Prize, I just prefer to know everything anonymously.
What?
Decompose that sentence. Probably worth decomposing.
You said you said
Okay,
it.
focus back on this.
It's Corbin's fault.
How much do you weigh?
Slope is this, what's it
How
mean?
much do you weigh?
The meaning of slope is.
No, it's not a picture, it's what it means in the real world for the real bottle.
The rate of change?
Huh?
Rate of change?
Well, yeah, because I've told you slope is the rate of change, but why?
Because it goes down or it goes up.
So I can't ask him.
Technically.
Where is
Just
that?
tell him.
Yesterday, we talked about how you analyze the meaning of a rate of change, right? Emblazon that in your mind because
Yeah.
I worked in detail through the process you need to analyze this and gave you a problem that asked you to analyze a few fairly simple, not all totally simple situations, and nobody did well on that. Now, that probably means that you just had last night and you had a bunch of problems, it was one of the later problems, and you decided maybe you should try to get 30 minutes of sleep before you get up for class, right?
Amen.
So, you know, that
I
can
don't
be,
know why
but
someone would think that.
you have time to do it now, so I'm telling you where to look in case you don't remember. Of course, all you gotta do is read down the names in front of the video links, and you can see where they are, okay? So anyhow, what does this mean? Well, I'll say meaning what? Well, how do you determine the meaning of a slope? You're going to deconstruct something. What are you going to deconstruct?
You're gonna rationalize.
The what?
You're gonna rationalize.
No,
The graph itself?
you don't need a graph. Graph is going to be helpful, but first you have to know how to break the problem down into at least two simpler parts. Can you break the question of what does a slope mean into two simple parts?
The change in altitude over the change in length.
Okay, and is there simpler words you can use?
Rise over run.
Rise over run. Now, that's about the fifth time I said when you think slope, think rise over run, because that breaks down the question of what's the slope or what's the slope mean, right? You got to go to rise and run. It's not just a single formula that comes to you all prepackaged. It's got meaning, okay? And that's the central idea, okay? So you really want to focus on that. So,
That's disgusting.
so, we're trying to get the meaning of the slope. It would be really, really reasonable to ask ourselves, what does the rise mean? And what does the run mean? It would be unreasonable to do anything else unless you already have a good idea of how to interpret slope, in which case it kind of becomes automatic. Okay? But right now I have the feeling it's not automatic yet for any of you. Okay? So what does a rise mean? What does a run mean? And what does a slope mean? Okay? Of course, we want to get the meaning of the slope, so that's our last question. But we answer two other questions first, so we have something to grab onto when we consider this last question. Okay? So what does a rise mean?
Change in depth.
What's a rise mean?
The change in depth.
The change in depth. I guess you said that already, but you were hiding behind Joanne and I didn't see her mouth moving, so I thought it was just, the universe speaking to me again. Okay.
The universe speaks to you?
Naturally.
Well, dang, how do I get that?
Well, you just gotta listen. Okay. What does a rise mean?
Change in altitude or depth.
Okay. I always end up writing more than I intend to. But you understand, this says rise is delta y is depth, so rise is change in depth, right? Make sense? Okay, what does a run mean?
Change of time.
Run is delta t. T is clock time. So run is the change. In clock time, right? So now, what does a slope mean?
Change in depth over the changing clock time.
Yep, exactly what I was going to write. Change in depth divided by change in clock time, right? And what's that mean? What's another way of saying the change in depth divided by the change in clock time?
Why? Not that quick.
The first word starts with an R.
Rate of change?
Rate of change of,
The rises, the run. I mean slope. I mean rate of change over.
now you don't know the words of the definition of rate of change. You know what?
Time.
You've got to know those words, because if you don't know those words, you're never going to understand calculus. Bingo. Period. Okay? Because that's what calculus is all about, and that's why you go dy over dt. It means rate of change is y with respect to t. And if you don't know what rate of change of this with respect to that is, you're never going to know what this and that are for sure in the middle of a problem that you're trying to deconstruct. And you're going to be confused when other people who know those words and maybe have equal ability with you, and you all have high ability, but would be able to get it. Okay?
So we just need change in depth. of
I'll
this.
write it down again, but I'll write this first. Rate of change of depth. Now I'm going to have to abbreviate with respect to as WRT. With respect to clock time. When you're doing calculus, you're going to have to know what your independent variable is and what rate of change of this with respect to that independent variable it is, because sometimes you got several variables you could take a derivative with respect to, and you got to know which rate of change exactly it is you're dealing with. And if you don't know the terminology, you don't understand it. Maybe you do, maybe there's another way to understand it, but I would say 98% of the population will not understand it unless they understand the words, and until they understand the words. So I say, Sometimes I say you don't want to start with a formula. You want to start with understanding and build the formula. Now, there are cases where you start with a formula and deconstruct it so you understand the meaning, and that's another way to understand meanings, okay? It can go either way, and I've said that before, but I emphasize this way because most people get a formula and stop there and never deconstruct it or understand it, okay? If you can get the answer without understanding anything, you're going to do it, especially if you're in a hurry. And often, most of the time, you're in a hurry because you procrastinate too much. We all do that. Okay. So I'm going to write down the definition of rate of change once more. Okay? And another note, there's often a confusion. Like a 5% interest rate is not a rate of change of anything with respect to anything. That's often a confusion. Okay? An interest rate is not a change in something divided by a change in something else. It's not what we call a rate of change. Now, actually, you could kind of torture it into that, but that's not the way it's understood. Interest rate is what you multiply by your principal to get your interest. Okay?